Greetings, growers. We're in a cherry orchard that has finished harvest. And with it being done, I think there's some important things we need to talk about. Many of you probably have finished harvest, but don't go on vacation just yet. There's some important things that can be done that can improve your yield potential. We're going to talk about those today. At post harvest, you have to think about it much like a heavy lift or a high exertion activity. Harvest is for trees the final exam. And just like an athletic event where you play 4 quarters at your top effort, it exerts you. Well, trees are no different. And so when we start looking at an orchard after harvest, the state of the canopy, the condition of the leaves can be indicative of some stress. Harvest in and of itself can create a tremendous amount of stress on a plant, especially as the crop load increases. And so as growers, you're probably working to produce above average yields and quality, because those are the two things you want to aim for. When you have those kinds of demands on the plant, there's a whole lot more going on than just nutrient removal. And to address all of those things the most effective way, you need to have in-season plant tissue sampling. That then gives you direction of what is in the plant, what is needed by the plant, and what will carry you through the growing season most effectively, especially at post-harvest, which happens to coincide with bud development stage. This is a very important part of the growing season. When you handle it right, it sets up your yield potential for next season. Now, we all want to take a break, just like the trees do after harvest, but don't go on vacation too soon, simply because there's certain things that should be done to help maximize your yield potential, which is going to affect your profit potential too for next season's crop. Growing permanent crops like cherries is tricky because you always have to be focused on growing 2 crops at a time. The current crop that's going to be harvesting and the potential development parts of next season's crop. But they both have to be managed correctly with the right nutrient management plan and with the right information, not just wild guesses. Guesses are expensive, fertilizers are expensive. If you guess wrong, it can be costly. When we look at a canopy and we see what it's doing, we look at how much vigor there is. And as you can see here, this is a standard planted orchard. We have plenty of vigor here. So probably there's not a problem with nitrogen here because of the vegetative growth we're seeing. Our in-season tissue analysis will tell us that. But what I am seeing is our internode spacing is shortening up, which tells me we're probably running out of zinc. Well, zinc is very important for bud development. So you want to make sure that with your in-season analysis, you know what your micronutrient needs are and you address those. The health of the canopy determines how effectively the plant can make sugars, which are for finishing a crop, but more importantly, the secondary metabolite compounds, which are the parts that plants use to defend themselves, to develop reproductive parts, and to increase yield potential. Also, don't forget, if you've got sunburn issues or heat stress issues, that also is indicative of deficiencies in your canopy. And you need to address those with in-season analysis so that those micronutrients are there, because they're the raw materials that photosynthetic cycle uses to build things like the cuticle, to build things like lignin, all vitally important for a healthy, productive plant. As we enter the growing season, it's summer. It's supposed to get hot in summer. High temperatures come from the sunlight, and that high heat stress and high light intensity can create stress within the plant, especially when it's not adequately equipped with the right nutrient supply. That's where your tissue analysis also comes in to support and give you confidence to what decisions need to be made going into the critical growing season so that the plant can, with your irrigation help and management, do the work it needs to do through the canopy and sunlight interaction with carbon dioxide, making those sugars that are so vitally important for a productive plant. Now let's consider all of that sunlight energy. When the leaves get too hot inside and the internal temperature of the plant gets to 95 degrees, the plant shuts down and it stops transpiring. Well, those leaves are still in the sunlight. Those leaves are still absorbing sunlight energy. And if they're not exhaling, because that's what it would be in human terms, if they're not transpiring and releasing the waste product called oxygen, that oxygen stays inside the leaves and starts to create oxidative damage due to oxidative stress inside the plant. That oxidative stress then damages proteins like chlorophyll and other photosynthetic machinery within the canopy that is vitally important to make those critical sugars. When that equipment is damaged, it needs the right micronutrients to help repair it. If they're not supplied, the plant continues to remain in stress and can't photosynthesize. And that stress continues to build, especially the longer the heat event goes on. Having a plan in a way to protect the canopy and not hinder its photosynthetic productivity and potential is the right answer. Yes, maybe we need to reflect some of that light, but we don't need to coat the tree completely so it can't absorb sunlight. Sunlight is the plant's friend. When we see stress, when we see sunburn, that's indicative of a problem and we need to be paying attention. Plants can't speak, they can only show us with the way that they grow and their traits what they're dealing with. And then it's up to us to take samples in order to get information in the form of analysis to then make determinations of the state of its condition and what does it need, if anything. When we have a canopy that is going to be out in nature and it's going to be hot, it's a good idea to put some coating on. We go about this a little bit different with our company than other companies do, but the bottom line is what we don't want to do is hinder the photosynthetic potential and productivity of the plant because the growing season is so vitally important for next year's potential. At post-harvest, we look at putting on a beneficial yeast biofilm that protects the canopy and doesn't hinder its photosynthetic potential. We look at the micronutrient needs, especially zinc, manganese, and boron. Those three are critical for photosynthetic productivity, especially in photosynthate or plant sugar translocation. And the better that plant can photosynthesize, the better it's able to manage its internal temperature. Having sugars in the plant act just like coolant in a radiator. The better we can produce these sugars in the plant canopy, the more it's able to maintain its internal temperature and keep a differential between the ambient temperature that you and I feel when we're out in an orchard and the actual temperature that's in the tree, because that's the one that dictates whether the plant is productively photosynthesizing or not. Looking for chlorosis, vitally important. If we see chlorosis, what's lacking? That needs to be sampled to have an idea of what is missing, because that is the plant's way of telling me I don't have everything I need. And those leaves cannot photosynthesize up to 100% of their genetic potential when they're lacking it with a deficiency. We give them some protection, we give them some micronutrients, but we also make sure that they don't need a little bit of energy bump. We like to use orthophosphate because that provides the needed raw materials for the plant to build ATP. ATP is the energy currency that plants run on. Adenosine triphosphate is vitally important, and when you provide adequate amounts of phosphate to the tree, regardless of what's in your soil inventory, what gets into the tree efficiently is what the plant has to work with. Applying a plant-ready or bioavailable form of orthophosphate ensures that the plant has that phosphate in order to make the ATP to power the photosynthetic process and take your micronutrients and weave them together to make flavonoids, to make phenolic compounds, to make alkaloids, to make terpenes. They're all vitally important in the secondary level because they help the plant defend itself and to tend itself. And when there's injury, they also help the plant mend itself. So it's a critical process that in many cases is hidden in plain sight to you and me as growers, but we have to tend that canopy in order to help it help itself. Trees can do a lot if we give them the right nutrition. So we got to give them the right nutrients, the right proportions of nutrients, and the only way to know for sure is with in-season plant tissue sampling. Those leaf analyses give us some very good information, and getting that in a timely manner can help you spend wisely with precision and confidence to achieve your utmost potential and really remain successful. Some products we work with from Axiom Ag are Thrive. It's a natural yeast biofilm and has a good volume of bacillic acids that help from the inside systemically protect and reduce stress events from summer heat intensity. So we have the outside protected with a biofilm that naturally degrades over about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the growing conditions. And internally, we supplement with the bacillic acids, provide a bit of a buffer inside the leaves and energy for that plant to use, supplement the photosynthetic energy. We also add a product called Deuces, which is zinc, manganese, and boron in a bioavailable form. These nutrients are vitally important for translocating sugars and ensuring that the plant photosynthetic productivity remains unchecked during the growing season. Also, we add a product called Energy. This is chock full of ammonia lactones. Now, this is a different form of nitrogen, but it triggers the plant's reproductive centers to stimulate more efficient bud development activity. And so coupling those together helps to provide a very good foundation for wrapping up the harvest season in preparation for the growing season ahead in order to maximize the potential for next year. But we do this with the help of in-season plant tissue analysis to make sure if there's anything else that's needed, we address that too. But in general terms, best management practices are Thrive, Deuces, and we use a little bit of Energy. Those three products work very effectively to address what cherry trees need most to recover well from harvest and be effective going into the growing season for bud development maximization. Here's to your crop success.